Hey, what's up everyone? This is Raphael.
And I'm Lauren.
And welcome to our spoiler-free review of Captain America: Civil War. So I think it goes without saying that I had extremely high expectations going into this film, like just about everybody else, you know, being a huge Marvel fan, and this being the first film in Phase 3 of their cinematic universe. And not to mention, this is a direct follow-up to Captain America: The Winter Soldier, which really set a whole new standard for just tone and action and all sorts of cinematic aspects of, you know, their movie continuity. Anyway, so this had that handful of things going for it that set the bar pretty high going in. And honestly, it's pretty pleasing to say that it just not only exceeded those expectations, but exceeded those standards set by the Winter Soldier previously by miles.
Of course, events have happened differently in the comics and in the MCU, and I really liked that they had that separation, because it ended up coming about in a way that only could have happened in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which is good.
So there was like a whole laundry list of things that I enjoyed about this film. For one, it was an extremely organic culmination of a bunch of stories that have been building up over the course of the MCU, and particularly over the course of recent films. You know, you got all these characters thrown into one mixing pot, and it just all comes together extremely organically in a way that makes perfect sense for the paths that these characters have been taking. So that was definitely something that I really enjoyed, and something that I was worried about going in with such a huge cast. There's always the issue that they might be shoehorned in to a certain extent, or some of the characters might be wholly unnecessary. That sometimes that might be something you run into in comics, which includes huge numbers of characters in event-type stories like this. But that definitely wasn't the case with the film. They definitely weaved everyone in a way that made sense. And I could say the same for the character motivations too, which was the most impressive aspect of the writing, I think, was the fact that all the characters had sensible, logical character motivations, and they all had their own individual reasons to be there. You know, obviously, there were some characters that were just sort of recruited in, but there was never the feeling that they were forced in, or never the feeling that they were doing something that didn't really make sense for their character to do. Everybody had a place, and it was just an impressive balance between this absolutely ensemble cast of superhero characters that just came together really well, and like I said, in a way that made sense for each of their motivations.
Everything was there for a reason. All the plots, all the characters were completely organic in the way that they were coming about.
But yeah, like I said, you know, it had a lot of tonal matches with the Winter Soldier, which I really enjoyed. That more serious, sort of solemn attitude. You know, it was very dark in a lot of ways, like its predecessor. And that's kind of what I tend to gravitate towards in these kinds of stories. But at the same time, it was extremely funny and really hilarious in all sorts of unexpected ways. There was a lot of characters that just I could not stop smiling at while they were on screen, and particularly with guys like, you know, introducing comic reliefs like Spider-Man and Ant-Man into the mix. They just had such great humorous moments to balance the generally somber mood oversetting the whole film. And with that being the case, you know, there was also all sorts of plotting that I really enjoyed. There was a nice even tempo throughout. In fact, I would say it was a very gradual slope. They definitely took their time building up the story, but they put all the necessary elements in place for you to be able to fully comprehend and enjoy the story, and they took their time. It was very patiently paced, I would say. They didn't rush to get straight into the main event, the main conflict, the whole Civil War ordeal that everyone was looking forward to, but instead they kind of put all sorts of detail into the setup and took all sorts of time for the setup just to make sure it was done proper, and just to make sure there's a story there and not just superheroes fighting for the sake of superheroes fight. And also, of course, I can't go without talking about the action. Just the whole film was epic in scale, and all aspects of the production and the crazy ensemble cast, and that was definitely reflected in the action. You know, the action itself was epic in scale, and there was just all sorts of crazy action sequences and just splash panel style battles throughout.
So the stunt work in this movie is amazing. All the stunts were spot on, everything was tight, all the choreography and stunt doubles especially did their job extremely well. Heidi Moneymaker, of course, Black Widow's stunt double, I think really shined in this movie.
I mean, overall, I would say the action was very well directed and very well choreographed through and through. It kind of reminded me of the first Avengers movie, with just how character driven all the action was. With the main difference being that this one was pretty much better shot, because you have David Leitch and Chad Stahelski, the co-directors of John Wick, doing second unit directing on this film. They shot the action scenes in such a way that had just a lot of respect for the action itself and for the stunt people and all the fighting work that was done in there. Like I said, they still had this sort of style that showcased the action in a way that you could follow, in a way that looked really good.
So telling stories in stunt work is always really important in film. And one of the things that I did notice was the stories between all these individual characters and how they fought each other in different situations. There's a big scene that happens where these two, or essentially the two sides, are clashing for the first time, and it seems like no one side really wants to hurt the other. But then when it gets to other scenes that carry a lot of weight and big turning points in these characters' stories, things start getting real. They genuinely start hurting each other. As friends, of course, but that just seems to switch off. And you can tell in the choreography and in the way that these characters start moving that they are beating the living hell out of each other. The choreography, like in contrast between these two situations, was vastly different, and it was amazing. One was raw and just throwing things and just hurting, and the other one was very stylish, and it came off as these characters were sparring with each other, essentially.
With that being the case, there was a lot of just specific character stuff that really stood out amidst these action sequences. For one, Black Panther moved like a freaking cat. You know, his movements were really interesting, and it kind of translated really fluidly from the comic book panels to a film character in a way that just kind of, you look at him and you're like, dude, this is Black Panther. This is really him. And just overall, all the movements across all the characters just flowed like butter. The action was hard hitting, it was fast paced, and it just kept moving. It didn't really take much time to stop, other than, you know, breaking for dialogue and stuff like that, which, you know, might have been a little overdone at points. There was certainly a gratuitous amount of one-liners in some of the scenes, but, you know, it wasn't really enough to take me out of the action, because of how immersive it was just to see this many darn major superhero characters on screen at the same time. And I definitely have a lot to say for the actors in this film too. You know, there was some extremely great cast chemistry, and definitely one of the standout interactions between the entire cast, I would say, is Robert Downey Jr. and Tom Holland.
So freaking Tom Holland's, man, he's a beast on screen, yo. He's freaking some age teenager-ish, and he's sharing screen space with Robert Downey Jr. and like stealing the show? What is that?
There was just some conversations and dialogue that they had together that just flowed so well and so naturally that you would think it might have been improvised or something. And there was also all sorts of, you know, little interactions between different pairs of characters and different couplings, and, you know, seeing how all these different kinds of characters interact with one another was really interesting, and that was presented very well by the actors, I think. And one thing that I didn't really, you know, expect to say, I mean, I saw, you know, like any Marvel fan, I saw Ant-Man last year, and, you know, I liked Paul Rudd. He came off as a very likable person, but seeing him in just this minor supporting role, returning as Ant-Man in this film, for some reason, it just clicked with me, and I was laughing my butt off at him. He just had such great chemistry with just about everyone he was on screen with, and he just had a lot of surprising standout moments that I didn't expect to just like drop my jaw at. You know, not only in regards to his humor, which he is just so extremely natural at, but also he had some pretty awesome standout moments in the major set piece of the Civil War itself. Anyway, going into it, there was this certain timidness with, you know, looking at the cast and being like, oh man, this might be another Age of Ultron, but honestly, it kind of reminded me again of the first Avengers, in the fact that all the characters seemed equally in focus, with the exception of maybe like the primary cast like Captain America and Winter Soldier, who definitely got a lot more focus, which was great because it kept it just balanced as a story, and again, to use the word focused, as a story that was pushing this specific point, and it was saying, yeah, this is still their story. But at the same time, there was for the length of the movie, there was a surprising amount of focus on the supporting characters, and it felt like everybody had something to do, everybody had a role, and everybody had a story arc.
In general, this movie really balanced the characters that they had very well.
For me, definitely the case in point was how much they were able to say about Scarlet Witch and the Vision, Wanda Maximoff, played by Elizabeth Olsen, and Vision, played by Paul Bettany. They just had a lot of screen time together, and you know, to comic book fans, that's for obvious reasons, but I was surprised by how much focus they were able to put on that story arc amidst the greater plot and amidst all the other events that were happening.
There wasn't any one character overpowering the rest. Well, it's a Captain America movie, so it's about Steve Rogers' side of the story, and you know, him wanting to protect his friends and trying to do the right thing when everybody else is trying to tell him that it's the wrong thing to do.
And with that being said, there was also a lot of characters that were getting their introduction in this film, and that seemed like it would suck a lot of time away from the main conflict, but it really didn't. There was just really efficient character introductions and exposition, and they just didn't waste time with it. You know, people like Black Panther and Spider-Man they just got them in there and they hit the ground running with them. You know, they didn't waste too much time with exposition, and they just essentially just told you only what you need to know for their role in this particular story.
So even though this movie had probably the most on-screen Avengers at one time, and actually I think this had the most on-screen superheroes at any one time in any superhero movie I think ever, and it still felt like a Captain America movie. It was still about Captain America's fight. You were following him and his journey, he didn't drown out anyone else. Everyone else had their share of the screen, and they didn't feel left out. Nobody felt like they were just, you know, forgotten in any part of this movie. The fight scenes, any of the drama, it was all very well balanced, and it felt like a comic book. Like there wasn't any part of this when I felt like this wasn't something that didn't belong in a Marvel movie. Everything fell together perfectly in such a way to tell this beautiful story, and it's really emotionally distressing story at times.
Anyway, with that being said, all in all, I would definitely say Captain America Civil War is up there as one of the greatest films in the MCU currently. Without a doubt. It is up there with the first Iron Man and with the first Avengers as just like some of my standout favorites. You know, there's just so many mind-blowing action set pieces and even mind-blowing, you know, twists and reveals. And it took one of the best elements of the Civil War comic that it's based on, in that it just had the essence of emotional turbulence. You know, there was so much drama and so many heavy moments where, you know, you really get to see these characters for who they are in the darkest corners of what they're willing to do when they're pushed. But like I said earlier, considering the scale, there's just a surprising amount of focus in the story and focus on the characters, and it was funny, and it was fun, and it was dark, and it was dramatic, and all of which were done in completely unexpected ways. Even, you know, minor characters like Frank Grillo as Crossbones just stood out just extremely well. You know, it felt like everybody did something, and you know, it felt like all the characters got to shine in their own unique way, while still keeping this balance with the primary characters and this focus on them that allowed them to get all the major story beats in a meaningful way. And there's just, like I said, this movie will hit you in all the feels for all sorts of reasons. Just seeing this ensemble cast of superheroes just on screen, when you see it, you just can't help but smile, because it just like, it's mind-blowing that this sort of cast and this sort of film is even capable of being done in a way that, you know, just doesn't suck like some previous attempts have.
It was a wild ride that I am so happy to have seen, and if I were to, you know, rate this, I'd probably rate it like 6 out of 5 or some crazy shit like that. It was really good, and I loved every second of it. Not a single thing that I disliked.
Overall, I would say that's my review. That it definitely comes highly recommended. You know, I'm getting excited just talking about it. I almost want to see it again. But yeah, hands down, like I said, one of the better films of the MCU thus far, and it makes me very excited for everything going forward. And yeah, I think that's about it. But anyway, that has been our review of Captain America Civil War, the third installment in the Captain America franchise, and the latest and greatest of the Marvel Cinematic Universe as a whole. Oh man, I hope you guys enjoyed. I certainly enjoyed just getting to vent all the feelings I have about this movie, because it was such an exciting joyride that, you know, I just can't help but be passionate talking about it.
I want to see it again, and I recommend you go see it too, because we're going to be releasing a spoiler cast sometime soon, so if you haven't seen it, you're going to want to. We're going to talk about this movie in a lot of detail, so watch out for that.
But anyway, I hope you all enjoyed. Please feel free to rate, comment, and if you haven't already, I encourage you to subscribe. Maybe click one of these videos, watch some other reviews, other kinds of stuff. We have all sorts of stuff around here. But anyway, shameless promotion's over now. I hope you have a good day. God bless.